Okay, so as we continue talking about items in geometry, again, uh, geometry is really big on definitions because you have to understand what they're trying to speak to you about, what they're trying to identify. If you don't understand the words, you're not going to be able to do the problem. So, understanding these words in the beginning will allow us to progress much easier through geometry. So, in defining terms, we've already talked about a point, a line, and a plane. And a point, there's a point, a line, and then a plane, maybe a two-dimensional flat object. And then a line, we might have some points on a line. And that's where we're going to go with these next items. And in defining terms, we want to be able to use undefined terms to precisely define parallel lines, perpendicular lines, rays, arcs, angles, circles, and line segments. And not only to define them, but to identify and name a pair of parallel lines, perpendicular lines, a ray, an angle, an arc, a circle, and a line segment. And we're going to be able to do that. It's the very basics, but understanding those definitions, again, are going to be the big thing. And if we go ahead and we're going to start by talking about a ray. And before doing that, let's just remember a line, we put the arrows on each end because that means it goes on forever. So if I were to label this possibly, that might be line L, and it goes on forever and ever to the left and to the right. But what we want to talk about is a ray here. An array looks something like that. If you'll notice, I have only one arrow. So a ray has a starting point and then a direction that it goes on forever. So if this was going to be segment A or point A and point B, if it was a ray, it would be ray AB, and then we would put a little ray symbol above it to identify it. And that's a ray. Unlike a line, it has a ending point and then it goes on forever in one direction. A line segment. Now, here, this line segment, a line segment is going to be something that has an end. So we might have this line, and it might be line L, and it has points C and D on it. But if we are only measuring the distance between C and D, right here, right? If we're only measuring that distance, that would be a line segment CD. So I could say CD, and I would just put a little dash above that indicates a line segment. A segment has a starting and a stopping point, which are your endpoints. Let's see here, what else can we do? Let's do an angle real quick. We'll skip parallel lines and we'll talk about an angle. And so my angle, well, if I were to just quickly draw an angle, I might do that. Okay, and that's an angle, and hopefully you guys can see that there's, some distance in here. But that angle, if I just look at it from the stuff that I just talked about, well, it seems that I could say, hey, there seems to be a starting point, an array that goes on this direction, and then it seems to be that same starting point, an array that goes on this direction. And if I were to go ahead and label those points, and I'm just going to say E, F, G. So if I look at that angle, it looks like I have two rays that come together at one point. And they're not going to talk about it, but this common endpoint that they share, I'm not going to talk about it for a while, but this would be my vertices. This would be a ray. And I could label that many ways. I could label this as angle F. I could label it as angle EFG. And placement is very important when you're putting it in order, because if you'll notice, my vertices is going to be in the center of the angle description. Now, if they also possibly did an angle this, maybe they say that is angle 1, so you could see angle 1. So there's many ways to measure that angle or to identify that angle. Let's see, what else can we talk about here? Circles. Well, I'm not going to do a perfect circle. Oh, well, it fixed it for me there. So if I have this circle, and this is all from a fixed point in the center, doesn't show up very well, but here's going to be my center point, and then it is everything. The circle is formed by a series of points that are equidistant from that center point. A set of all points in a plane that are a given distance away from a given point called the center. So this could possibly be center H, or circle H in this case. So we have circle H, and I know that this distance right here is going to be my radius, and that is going to be the same distance all around my circle. And you may or may not recall that if you go all the way through, that would be called your diameter now, which is 2 radiuses. And let's see, what else can we talk about? I don't have it listed down here, but maybe we want to identify our arc length, or just an arc. So a segment along here, say that is point A, point B, that would be considered arc AB. If I wanted to identify that, it would be arc AB, right there. So just throwing some information out here, sort of showing how you label it and identify it. Let's see here. What else can we talk about? Lines. Okay. I wish I had a picture of it, but parallel lines and perpendicular lines. There are ways to identify parallel lines. And those lines are, I would say, you might say, well, those lines look parallel, but they're not. Parallel lines have a distinct identifier, and they are identified with arrows. And two lines with arrows like that mean that they are parallel. And something you may remember from algebra is they have the same slope. They do not intersect anywhere along the lines. And in order to be parallel to, they've got to exist on the same plane. So they're all on the same plane. So these lines would be considered parallel, showing your parallel marks. And then the other thing we can talk about is possibly the perpendicular lines. And you may recall that, or should I say, perpendicular lines are lines that intersect and form a right angle, and a right angle is going to be 90 degrees. Well, you may recall that this is your coordinate plane, and it is based on a right angle, and this is two lines that form at a 90 degree, a right angle point, and they're perpendicular. And this symbol right there, it stands for 90 degrees or perpendicular. So you know that whether it looks right or not, and I do this, that means those lines are 90 degrees apart. That's what this means. If I rush it, that's not even good. If I rush it and do that, well, those lines look like they're getting closer and closer on this end, but it doesn't matter. If I say that those things are parallel, they're parallel. So not drawn to scale. You have to be careful of that. Making sure that you don't make those assumptions that something is perpendicular or parallel or a certain degree without knowing for sure. So looking at those are a lot of terms, but I'm willing to bet you guys already knew all of those from previous math classes. This is hopefully just a refresher. One last thing that I may have not mentioned, no, I didn't. This is going to be circle H right here, so you could say circle H. That's how you would identify that. And that is summing these all up together. And just understanding the terms and the labels. I say you need to make sure things are not, you need to make sure you understand what they're asking you because things are not drawn to scale. Everybody's gone to a restaurant, fast food, and you've looked at the menu and said, oh, that looks great, that's what I want to get. And then when they serve it to you, it's not quite what you were expecting. Those menus are not drawn to scale. You're not getting what's in the picture. So that's why you have to make sure you know what the picture is really, what they're giving you, so you don't make those assumptions. So again, identifying and being able to label items. That's where we're at right now in our defining terms.